Good evening and welcome. I am Sister Barbara Reed, President of Catholic Theological Union, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this year's Holocaust Remembrance Lecture Series. It is apt that tonight we remember the Holocaust as we also hold in our hearts the fresh pain of those who were brutally murdered this week in new acts of racially motivated terrorism here in the US, and also those who are suffering and dying in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We remember, and we continue to pray for a cessation of violence and for a just and lasting peace to envelop our world. For those of you who may be new to CTU, we were founded in 1968 in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, and we have been very committed since our founding to interreligious dialogue, especially through our Catholic Jewish Studies and Catholic Muslim Studies programs. Under the leadership of Father John Polakowski and Rabbi Chaim Perlmutter of blessed memory, two of our founding faculty members, the Catholic Jewish Studies program became a hallmark of CTU, and we treasure the deep and lasting friendships that have been formed between CTU and our Jewish partners in the last 5 decades. In 2001, CTU established a chair in Jewish Studies made possible by a most generous gift of Lester and Renee Crown and Patrick and Shirley Ryan, which has been held, this chair has been held since 2014 by Dr. Malka Zeiger-Simkevich, along with her directorship of the Catholic Jewish Studies program. Dr. Simkevich holds an MA in Hebrew Bible from Harvard University and a BA in Bible Studies and Music Theory from Stern College of Yeshiva University. She earned her PhD in Second Temple Judaism from Brandeis University. In May 2019, Dr. Simkevich initiated the Holocaust Remembrance at CTU, which includes 3 components. Number 1, a lecture on the background of the Holocaust. Secondly, an in-person visit to the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And third, a talk given by a Holocaust survivor with question and answers. Last week, we were honored to hear a presentation on the background of the Holocaust by Rabbi Yehiel Pupko, a longtime friend of CTU. If you missed it, it will soon be available at learn.ctu.edu. The second part of our Holocaust Remembrance series, an in-person visit to the Illinois Holocaust Museum, took place last Sunday. And tonight, we welcome Holocaust survivor Dr. Adina Sella for part 3 of our series. I invite you to visit our website, ctu.edu, for more information about our programming. Whether a new friend or a longtime friend, we hope you will join us often. And now, Dr. Simkevich will introduce tonight's lecture.
Thank you, Sister Barbara, and good evening. My name is Malka Zeiger-Simkevich, and I am the Chair of Jewish Studies and the Director of the Catholic Jewish Studies program at CTU. I would like to thank you for joining us at this evening's lecture. As Sister Barbara said, this is the last of 3 events which comprise our annual Holocaust education series that takes place every May. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to say a few words about why we created this series. Across our country, and indeed throughout the world, anti-Jewish violence and rhetoric is surging. This is a staggering reality, given that it has been only 2 or 3 generations since the destruction of European Jewry and the murder of 6 million Jewish people by the Nazis and their complicit neighbors. Today in the United States, Jews are more likely than any other minority group to experience a violent hate crime. Polls which track anti-Semitic rhetoric and violence show that last year, anti-Semitic events in the United States were at the highest than they have ever been since the tracking began. And this year, we are on pace for anti-Semitic hate crimes to be at even higher levels. Progressive communities throughout the country are doing admirable work in the fight against systemic racism and hatred. But too often, the problem of anti-Semitism is left behind, marginalized, and ignored, and at times perpetuated by the very people who are hired to combat racism. Often, particularly on campuses throughout the country, though I'm glad to say not at CTU, complaints that Jewish students make about being victims of hate crimes are dismissed because these Jews are told that they are white and part of the problem, powerful, privileged, and unworthy of attention or allyship. One need look no further than Whoopi Goldberg's comments a few months ago that the Holocaust was simply a story about white against white violence to understand what I mean. Yet all evidence points to the fact that anti-Semitism is not simply a problem which derives from white supremacy. Anti-Semitism often takes the form of whatever a community fears the most. I myself have been on the receiving end of right-wing nationalist anti-Semitism by young people who have insisted that the Holocaust never took place, that Jews are not a forgiving people, and that Jews, quote, should just get over it. But I've also been on the receiving end of people who identify with the progressive left. We are witness today to rising numbers of young people joining the ranks of white supremacists who hate Jews and they extol the Nazis who wanted to annihilate them. But we're also witness to rising numbers of members of the political far left who express their hatred of Jews and Jewish self-determinism by calling Jews Nazis. Both of these communities are telling Jews that they have no place in the society of the good. The current situation is alarming and discouraging. Tonight's event is about education. We ask you to hear Dr. Stella's story as an inspirational call to action, to stand up against anti-Semitism of all kinds. It is an invitation for you to include the fight against anti-Semitism in the important and public work which combats all forms of hatred and racism. If you are a public advocate for anti-racist work, we ask that you proactively work as well on behalf of the minority population that is experiencing more incidents of hate than any other minority in the country. I am so honored to introduce you all to Dr. Adina Sella. Dr. Sella was born in 1935 in Hamburg, Germany. She spent most of the Second World War in Italy, as we'll hear. She arrived in Palestine in 1945, where she went to school and served in the army. From there, Dr. Sella moved to Geneva, Switzerland, where she earned a master's degree and met her future husband. In 1963, Dr. Sella and her husband moved to the United States, first settling in Seattle, then New York, and finally here in Chicago. And in this talk, Dr. Sella will share the extraordinary details of her survival. So for about the next half hour or so, we are going to hear from Dr. Sella, learn about her story. And our hope is that in the last 10 or 15 minutes of this event, we are going to give you, the audience, the opportunity to share questions, to also share comments, insights, if you have. And you can either communicate your questions and comments in the chat towards the end of the half hour, or you can use the hand raise feature and we will be very glad to call on you. So without further ado, please join me in a silent welcome and join me in thanking Dr. Adina Sella.
Thank you very much, Malka. I am honored to be here. I am very thankful for the opportunity to once again help people understand what it was like to be a child of the Holocaust, meaning that my childhood evolved during the Holocaust. And I would like to help you understand that a child, God gave us 18 years of childhood and adolescence, meaning that there is a lot of work in normal circumstances for a child to learn how to be an adult of his species. I had to learn it, I don't know how. So I was born in Hamburg, Germany, to an upper middle class family, and they were doing very, very well. I was 3 years old, 3.5, when the Nazism started to affect me as a little girl. The first thing that happened was that, I don't remember in what time, but early in my childhood, Hitler decreed that every Jewish person has to have a recognizable Jewish name, recognizable. My mother and father named me Peggy. Little did they know that Peggy is a diminutive of Margaret. But they were looking for a nice name for a nice girl that starts with P to honor my grandmother, whose name was Privet. So when my mother heard Peggy, she had no idea that it was a diminutive, and she said, sehr schön, wunderbar, and named me Peggy. So I was born Peggy Schaufeld. I had to take a
Dr. Sella, we can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry, Colleen.
can you hear me? I moved a little bit. Hello?
We can hear
We
you.
can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I became Sarah Schaufeld. And in 1939, the German came and grabbed my father and took him away. My mom, who was very cute, very beautiful, very little, and she was kind of a damsel in distress look, but she was she took my brother, who was older than me, and walked up to the Gestapo, the headquarters of the Nazis. And with these two children, she walked up, and when we had the Star of David, of course, and they asked her in impolite German, "Was willst du?" instead of "möchten Sie?" And she said, "Mein Mann." Luck has it, there was a nice young officer who talked with her and says, "Well, where's your husband?" She says, "You took him last night." He asked for the adjutant to look at the passport, and he took out my father's passport, in which there was a visa for Shanghai, but he needed a transit visa in Italy to get the boat. So he gave my mother the passport and says, "If you, within 24 hours, if you get that visa, we'll let him go," which was enormous. She went to we all went, always together, we all went to the Italian consulate, "Signora, per favore," very polite, and so on and so forth. They gave her the transit. Now we went back to the Lions den, and with luck, this gentleman was there, the officer. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. And an officer honors his word, and he let my father out. So within 24 hours, my father was on the train to go to Italy. As he was in Italy, the boat to China was supposed to leave, but he didn't take it because my mother said, wait for us, don't ever go anywhere. That boat, once it left the territorial waters of Italy, exploded. Whether it was a mine or it was a bomb, because it was all full of Jewish refugees. In Italy, the people are very sentimental, so they realized that there was a man who was supposed to go on the ill-fated boat, but didn't go. Signore Fortunato. So the Jews around him said, David, why don't you go to the authorities and tell them maybe they can help you? So my father went to the Italian authorities, and they said, "Oh, Signore Fortunato, you're the fortunate man. What can we do for you?" So he said, "I have a wife and 2 children in Hamburg. They need a transit visa, please." So they wired the consulate, and we got the visas, and we were out. And we came to Italy to take the boat in Venice. No, not in Venice. Genova. I don't know where. And my mother did not want to go. She just dreaded. She didn't want to go that far. So she postponed once, she postponed twice. 39, the war is going on, and no more boat to China. So we became refugees of the Italians. And they took us to the south of Italy and put my father with other Jews in a concentration camp. But
Excuse me, Dr. Sella. I think you may be covering your microphone at some points.
I'm not touching anything.
Okay.
So we were interned. The men were in a concentration camp, totally. The gate. There was a gate, but nothing happened to them. They were able to celebrate the holidays. They wore their own clothes. Nobody hit them. Nobody bothered them. And one day, the Italians said to the Jewish guys, the gate is open. We don't know. We know that's bad times for you. We don't even know where to tell you to go, but go, because the Germans are coming. So we got permission to go to the Tuscany by Arezzo, Florence, Arezzo, that area. And there in the city of Arezzo, we were declared interned. We had to, what it meant is that every morning we had to go to the police, sign that we are still present, that we didn't run away. And they provided us with an apartment. And we were not allowed to go to school, my brother and I. So we went to the Catholic school, the nuns. The nuns knew that we were Jewish. My nun was a kind nun, but she really wanted me to believe, to learn about Jesus and to convert me a little bit. My brother's nun was totally open-minded, and they knew that we are in terrible danger every day. The father confessor of the nuns, unbeknown to them, was also a partisan. And because of his connection to the underground, he knew the movement of the German army. He also knew that if we learn the Catholic way of behaving, we will be safe. Because when you ask the Italian, are there any foreigners? They will go by the way you behave. If you behave like everybody else, you're not a foreigner. So he made sure that we know the Catholic liturgy and everything in our sleep. Every evening before a Catholic holiday, and you know how in Italy and Spain they celebrate with processions, there's all kinds of rituals. He'll come in the evening and he would say to my mom, domani è la festa di Sant'Antonio. And on the feast of Saint Anthony, you do A, you do B, you do C. And we did exactly like we were coached. One day, he said, you have to leave. And my mother always had we had packages that are at the door in case we have to run. Everybody knew what to grab, and we went. So they sent us to a little town an hour away, but we went as far as the train can go. And there we sat, and the first place we sat down, they kicked us out. The second place we were able, and two policemen came and grabbed my father. Oh my God, an hour, 2 hours, we had no idea what's going on. But after close to 3 hours, my father comes back, and he has in his possession false identity cards for the four of us. The name was changed to Scapelli, and now I am Lucia Scapelli. Lucia Scapelli, molto bene. But before, I wanted to tell you, when I was in school in Arezzo before, my father told me briefly, we are Jewish, but we have to disguise ourselves, and we cross ourselves only in emergency. I'm five, emergency, what do I know? So we go to school, and my classroom is on the second floor. We go one floor up, and there is a Madonna, a Virgin, on a pedestal. All the children cross themselves, and I'm thinking emergency. I look at the face of this sculpture, this Madonna, and I'm saying, she's so nice. She's not gonna hurt me. She'll protect me. And I crossed myself every single day, and I had a relationship. And time went by. We are now in the small town of Anghiari. We live in a modest apartment with some people. And one day the Germans get there, and we run. And we end up in a teeny village where there's a church, and the place where the priest lives. What is it called? The sacristy? What is it called? Where the priests live.
The rectory.
Rectory. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so we stayed there, and we heard already the artillery. The Germans were bombarding that place, and my mother was running around and praying. She wants to hear machine gun. I am 6 or 7, and I'm saying to her, why does she want to hear machine gun? What? Because machine gun, we were protected in the house, but artillery, that could blow up the house and all of us together. One day, in middle of the night, the door flies open and 7, 8 German soldiers walk right in. There was a stable next to the house, and they headquartered there. And they were giving my mother all kinds of instruction, do the eggs, boil this, do that, in German. And they never figure out why she understands and does exactly what they're saying. And my father said, you know, these are the Germans who are going on the retreat. They are not Nazis. They couldn't care less. They want to go home in one piece. They're tired. And so it was that one night they told us, tonight we are leaving, and when we are half a mile away, we are going to erase the place. So my brother, and they said to us, go away, run away. So that we went into the forest when my brother was, I don't know what, 11. He says, oh, I know how to go, because he used to go collecting firewood. And then he didn't know anymore, but we walked and we started to hear voices. And we didn't know which language. When we walk in 4 Jews walking erect in the woods, and we hear, fire. And we're walking and we hear voices and we couldn't make out the language. All of a sudden, a young man, young British boy, jumps at us and tells us to lie on our bellies down and crawl. We got to their trenches. Imagine we were in between the trenches of the Germans here shooting at the British there, and 4 Jews walking erect. A miracle. So we were, but the minute we jumped into that trench, we were saved from and they brought us back to Arezzo, the city of which we first ran away. And we stayed there, and there was nothing to eat, there was nothing to drink. It was miserable. There was a communist kitchen that we went once a day. We got a soup and a piece of bread, soup during lunch and bread in the evening. And we were walking around, and there was a fountain where we lived, and that was the only thing that people could get water. So one day I see a tanker. There's a tanker there tanking water. And I look and I say to my dad, he has what we have, which I saw a Star of David. So I said, Dad, he has what we have. And it was it was a soldier of the Palestinian Jewish Brigade. And this is how we got to Palestine. So the Holocaust itself, my experience, I didn't have really much schooling. I never had friends. We were tightly going to school and back. And the nuns taught us, as the nun do, it's most important, the calligraphy. When they knew, if they knew today that that the best thing is to teach us typing, they didn't know. So calligraphy was very important. Math, not much. And we didn't know anything. My brother and I we didn't understand anything, but we also did not ask questions. So
Dr. Stella, I'm sorry, we can't hear you right now.
It just happens that in 1945, nobody knew about the Holocaust, the death camp, and what really happened to Jewry. We didn't know. But my mother had a brother in Palestine, and my father had a sister, so we decided that that's where we need to go. So we came to Palestine, and that's really where the Holocaust suffering started for me. Because until that time, I was always with my mom and dad and my brother. And for a little girl, as long as she has her mom, I didn't understand really the the horror of what the Germans are aiming to do with us. I had no idea. Actually, nobody knew about the camps. When we came to Palestine, I had to go with my mother to an office of some formality. And the lady says to me, "What's your name, little girl?" And I say, "Peggy." She says, "Oh, little girl, this is a new country and we have our language. And how about a new name?" By that time, this was my fifth name. I said, "Okay." I was like really a shadow of a self. So she looks at me and she says, "Why don't we call you Adina?" which means grace. I must have been very shy and very little and now I'm big and okay. But so when children approached me, like, "What's your name?" I used to say to my mama, "Muti, Muti, Vihaisi, what's my name?" She'd remind me, and Adina stuck, and I'm very proud of that name. And so the youth movement in Israel wanted to make it easier on the parents to find their bearings. So they took me and my brother into a kibbutz, a community, what's a kibbutz? It's a village community. And they took children in to help the parents settle. And that's where the Holocaust started for me, experientially. Being taken away from my mother, I could not tolerate. They couldn't do enough for me, taking care of me, and I just couldn't. So my brother and I ran away, and then my brother was wiser and more obedient, and so they said, we can send my brother, to another village which is closer by. So they sent him to a kibbutz. He was 12 years old. He was 12 and a half. He had bar mitzvah and he's 12 and a half. And he was 12 and a half when they took him in to help our family, so less for my parents to worry. And last week he celebrated his 90th birthday, and he has been a member of that village, all his life. And I lost my brother, kind of, because we were separated. So in my youth, I left. So my father could not find his bearing at all. He was a successful businessman, but he couldn't do anything else. He just couldn't find his way. So he went back to Europe to find maybe he can do something. So I was left with my mother, and people asked me, "Where's your father?" I would say Europe, and my brother is on the kibbutz. I lived with my mother for years, and people thought that I was an illegitimate child, and that the thing that my father is in Europe is a story, a cover story, and that hurt very, very much. Furthermore, when in 1945, when we came, a little bit after we came to Palestine, the horrors of the Holocaust came with the refugee that came to the shores of Palestine. They came by the droves, and their stories were horrendous. It was awful. So we, the survivor of the Holocaust, that were not in camps, were kind of shut down. We had no right to talk, and we were never telling anything about.
Dr. Sella, your voice is cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, good.
That's better. Thank you.
So I suffered shame for being. They used to tell us, "Oh, you, the kids, you went to the slaughter, like lamb to the slaughter. You did, they were mocking at us." And at the same time, when we said how horrible it was and how frightened we were, people say, "That's nothing. What about the people from Auschwitz?" So this whole idea that my childhood was less than optimal and very scary was not acknowledged, and no help was given, and the story was nothing. So we became kind of pseudo-Israelis, we became more obnoxious than the ones that are born in Israel. We call them sabra, which is a cactus fruit. And what is the cactus fruit is very, very prickly from the outside, but when you open it, it's beautifully succulent and sweet. So are the kids that are born in Israel. They have an outer layer of aggression unbelievable. And we emulated them, so we became deniers of the Holocaust all the years. I finished high school by miracle. I don't know how. I was a horrible child in school. And my mother was afraid to go to the teachers because the teachers would only speak Hebrew and she couldn't hack the Hebrew. So it was like total, nobody to help, nobody to clarify, nobody to kind of validate and normalize our childhood so that we can understand why we suffer the way we suffer. Then after finishing high school, I went to the army. And the army, I was very proud of being in the army, and I became an officer. And then, I went to study in Switzerland after I came out of the uniform. I really had no idea who I am. I had no idea what is expected, what to do. I was a mess. So the way I healed was, first of all, in Switzerland, very early after my arrival, I met a boy that went to medical school. He's Israeli. And he was my age, but he had an old soul. And he knew instinctively what's going on. And he helped me understand life and and not be so afraid. But to make a long story short, I had 7 years of excellent therapy, and my therapist said to me, she was a doctor, a psychiatrist that studied in Vienna, a Jewish lady, and she said, "Look, the fact that your feet are on the ground and your head is up is already a miracle." So, and she really helped me understand normal life, relationships, expectation. Human suffering, and made me, with her, I was able to become who I was meant to be. So basically, this is my story, and if you want to know, I welcome questions, all the questions, and I'll try my best to help you understand where I come from. I know where I'm going. I'm 87 years old, but I can tell you where I was and how many languages I speak, and so on and so forth. I studied with Professor Piaget in Geneva. And then when we came to the United States, I worked, I published as a psychologist, but my husband, all his years, says, "Adina, you got to have a PhD." And I said to him, "I don't want to go back to school. I hate school. I don't like it." She says, "Adina, it's a credential society, America. You need to have a PhD. You will apply for a job. Another shmegegi will come, another guy will come, and it wouldn't be half as good as you. Have the PhD, you'll get the job." So thank God I listened, and slowly, credit after credit, I finished my doctorate in Chicago. And unfortunately, my husband died early, and I had to provide for me and my child. And thank God I listened to him. And here I am. I am living in a retirement community where Sister Jean lives. You know who Sister Jean is? Sister Jean. Yeah, we're in the same place. Okay, you know Sister Barbara. And I want to tell you something else. Many years after the war, I was married. We had my brother and I had children, and he had children, and grandchildren. And we organized a family trip to Italy to have the children see a little bit where we've been and all the stories and all the events. So we came to the nuns. Of course, the nuns that taught us were not alive anymore, but they knew who we are. And they received us with open arms. It was just so touching. They made a big lunch for us, beautiful. And we talked. And then it was time to leave. I say to the superior, I says, sister, when I was a little girl, there was a Madonna up on the landing and I don't see her. She says, oh, la Madonna, see. They bombarded us so much. So we took her and put her in a place where she will be protected. Do you want to see her? I said, yeah. And so she took me into some kind of basement and in a corner, and in the corner was the Madonna. Now, when I met the Madonna, I was on the first step and she was up on the landing and she was on a pedestal. Now, I am not a child anymore and she is without the pedestal. So she was tiny, so tiny. And I said, and I looked at her and she had that, of course, she has that same face. So I thanked her profusely and I went home. So if you have any questions or you want more about how it is to be a child of the Holocaust, please don't hesitate. Thank you.